The night was heavy with smoke and silence. Ruins of an alien village stretched across the valley, broken homes and shattered lives lying under the pale light of two moons. The ground was still warm from recent fire, and the air carried the bitter smell of ash. Nothing moved, nothing lived, only shadows that whispered of war and despair. In the middle of this silence, a sound broke through. It was not the growl of machines or the roar of soldiers. It was the thin, desperate cry of a child. A small alien boy stumbled through the wreckage, his face covered with dirt, his tiny hands shaking. He cried with all the strength left in his little chest. "Human, please, save my mom." His voice cracked again and again, but no one answered. Aliens hiding in the shadows heard him, but they turned their heads away. To them, the weak were already lost, and mothers too sick to fight were left behind. The boy fell to his knees, coughing, his tears making lines across the dust on his face. He clutched a broken toy, the last memory of home, and he cried again, "Please, someone, save her." But his people only watched, their eyes cold, their hearts hardened by long years of suffering. No one came forward, no one cared. From the edge of the ruined street, a human traveler stood still. He was a lone wanderer, a stranger in this war-torn land. He had heard many cries in his life, but this one cut deeper. Something in the child's voice, something in the word mom, touched a place in his heart that he had buried long ago. He remembered his own mother, the way she had fought against sickness, the way she had smiled even when pain was killing her. He remembered the helplessness of watching someone he loved fade away. And in that moment, he could not walk away. The human stepped closer, his boots crunching over broken stone. The alien boy looked up, his glowing eyes wide with shock. He had expected silence, or maybe laughter, but not this. "Please," the boy whispered again, his voice softer now. "You are human. You can help." The human knelt in front of him, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. His hand was rough and strong, yet the boy felt warmth for the first time in days. "Where is she?" the man asked, his voice steady. The boy pointed toward the broken shelter at the far end of the ruins. "She is trapped inside. She cannot move. She cannot breathe right," he said, trembling. "They left her there. They said she is worthless. But she is my mother. She is my everything." The human's eyes narrowed as he looked across the destroyed street. There were dangers waiting, collapsed walls, toxic fumes, and soldiers who might return at any moment. Logic told him to walk away, to save himself. But compassion was stronger than logic in his heart. He thought of the boy's pain, of the mother left alone in the dark, and something inside him decided. "No one is worthless," he said firmly. "I will see her." From the nearby ruins, a few aliens whispered to each other. "Foolish human," one said. "He will die for nothing." But the man ignored them, his eyes fixed only on the boy. "Stand," he told him gently. "Show me the way." The boy's hope flickered like a weak flame. He could not believe that someone, especially a human, would risk everything for his mother. Yet here was this man, strong and steady, ready to walk into danger for her. As they began to move, the boy stumbled, his legs too weak. The human lifted him easily, carrying him on his back. The child clung to him, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you. You are the only one." And the man answered, "Sometimes, one is enough." Together, they walked toward the broken shelter. The night grew colder, and the silence deeper. Every step felt heavier, but the bond between them grew stronger. One was a child, fragile and afraid. The other was a man, burdened with memories, yet burning with a quiet fire. And though the galaxy around them had turned cruel, in that ruined village, hope began to move again, carried on the shoulders of one human who chose to listen to a child's cry. The human carried the boy on his back through the broken streets. Each step echoed against walls that once held laughter and life. Now they were only hollow shells, burned and broken. The child clung tightly, his small arms trembling as he tried to speak. "My mom, she was kind," the boy whispered. "She sang to me every night, even when her body hurt, even when she had no strength." The human listened in silence, his heart heavy with every word. "She gave me her food when we had nothing. She drank only water so I could eat," the boy continued. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. "Aliens here said she had no value. They said she was too weak to live. His tears touched the man's shoulder. But to me, she is my whole world. Without her, I am nothing. The human tightened his grip on the child. He felt the truth in those words. Strength was not in muscles or weapons. Strength was in sacrifice, in love that gave without asking. And the boy's mother had shown that strength every single day. They turned a corner, passing broken towers and scattered bones. The human asked, "Why did no one help her?" The boy lowered his head, ashamed. "They believe in the strong. Only the strong survive here," he whispered. "If you are sick, if you are old, if you are weak, they say you are worthless." His small voice shook with anger and pain. "But she is not worthless. She is my mother, and I will never leave her." The man's eyes darkened. He had seen this before, in other places, on other worlds. Societies that forgot kindness always ate themselves alive. He thought, if compassion dies, then no victory, no empire, can last. And he knew deep inside that this rescue was more than saving one life. It was about reminding everyone what it meant to be alive. The boy's voice grew softer, almost fading into the night. "They told me to forget her, to let her go," he said. "But I could not. So I ran, I screamed, I prayed." His tiny fists clenched against the man's shirt. "Then you came, the one human who listened." The human stopped walking for a moment. He looked at the boy's eyes glowing with desperation. "No child should have to beg for their mother's life," he said quietly. "But tonight, your mother will know her son did not give up on her." As they reached the broken shelter, the boy's breath quickened. There, he pointed, his hand shaking. Inside, under the stones. The structure was half collapsed, beams twisted, rubble piled high. The air smelled of dust and death. It was the kind of place where hope usually went to die. The boy slid off the man's back, falling to his knees. He pressed his small hands against the stones, trying to move them, but they were too heavy, far beyond his strength. Still, he pushed and pushed, until his hands bled. Tears ran down his cheeks as he cried, "Mom, I'm here, I brought someone." A faint cough came from inside the rubble. A weak voice, barely alive, whispered something. The boy froze, his ears straining. Then he smiled through his tears. "She's alive, she's still alive." The human knelt beside him. "Step back," he said firmly. "Let me." He placed his hands on the rubble, muscles straining, sweat dripping down his face. Stone by stone, he began to clear the path. The boy watched, hope burning brighter with each rock that moved. "Careful," the child begged. "She is fragile. Please do not hurt her." The man nodded, his eyes sharp, his hands gentle despite their power. He had carried weapons heavier than this, fought enemies stronger than this. But nothing had ever felt as important as moving these stones. For behind them was not just a woman. Behind them was a mother's love, a boy's hope, a reason to fight. The night grew colder as they worked. Shadows deepened, and danger whispered from every corner. But neither the man nor the boy stopped. One carried love, the other carried strength. Together, they pushed back against despair. And as the final stone shifted, a small gap opened. The boy dropped down, his voice breaking with joy. "Mom, it's me. I found help. You're not alone anymore." From inside came a faint hand, trembling, reaching. The human caught sight of her for the first time, an alien mother, weak but unbroken. Her eyes flickered with both pain and love as they fell upon her son. In that single moment, the human understood the truth. This was not just about saving a life. It was about saving the bond that made life worth living. And he swore silently to himself, "No matter the cost, I will not let this mother die tonight." The human stood over the rubble, his chest heaving from the effort. Dust covered his face and sweat dripped into his eyes. Behind him, the boy clutched at his sleeve, whispering, "Please, don't stop. She's right there." The faint sound of a weak breath came from inside, like a candle flame fighting against the wind. The man paused, looking at the broken shelter. It was dangerous, every stone ready to collapse again. Toxic air leaked from cracked pipes, making each breath heavy and sharp. The risk was clear. One wrong move, and they would all be buried. But when he turned, he saw the boy's glowing eyes filled with desperate hope. It was not just a plea. It was trust, complete trust in him. And the human realized the weight of that trust was heavier than any stone. Around them, whispers rose from the shadows. Other aliens had gathered quietly, watching. He's wasting his time, one muttered. That woman is already gone. Another sneered. Humans pretend to be heroes, but they die faster than anyone else. But the man did not answer. He let their words fall like ash. Instead, he looked straight at the boy and asked, "Do you believe your mother can still live?" The boy's voice cracked as he shouted, "Yes. She has to, because I still need her." That was enough. The human tightened his hands into fists, his eyes burning with resolve. He had made many choices in his life. Choices of survival, choices of war, choices of escape. But this was different. This was not about him. It was about a child's love, a mother's sacrifice. And he knew that if he turned away now, he would carry the weight of that choice forever. "I will not leave her," he said, his voice echoing through the ruins. The boy gasped, and his small hands trembled with relief. But from the shadows, one alien guard stepped forward, armored and armed. His cold voice cut through the night. "You cannot save her, human. Walk away before I end you." The man stood tall, dust still clinging to his clothes. His eyes narrowed, and his hand rested on the worn blade at his side. "I don't walk away from mothers or children," he answered firmly. The guard laughed harshly. "Then you will die for nothing." But the boy stepped in front of the man, his voice shaking but loud. "He is not nothing. He is the only one who listened to me, the only one who came." The crowd of aliens grew restless. Some looked away ashamed. Others shook their heads, convinced this was foolishness. But none dared to step forward, none but the human. The guard's weapon gleamed under the moonlight. The man's blade was old, simple, and scarred, but his will was sharper than any steel. He whispered to the boy, "Stay behind me, no matter what." And then he stepped forward, standing between the mother's broken shelter and the danger that threatened her. The air grew still, the silence heavy. The boy's heart pounded as he watched the man face the impossible. The child thought, "Why would a stranger fight for us? Why would he risk everything for me?" But deep inside, he felt the answer. Because kindness was a choice, and this man had chosen it. The guard raised his weapon, but before he could strike, the rubble behind them shifted. A faint cough, a weak voice called out, "My son." The boy's eyes widened, his breath caught. "Mom," he cried, his small legs running forward. The human pulled him back quickly, shielding him with one arm. The rubble groaned, threatening to collapse again. The boy struggled, begging, "She called me. She's alive. Let me go." The man's jaw tightened, his mind racing. He had seconds to choose. Fight the guard, save the mother, or save the boy. The wrong choice would mean death, but the right choice could mean hope. The guard snarled, ready to attack, but the human's eyes burned with fire. He called out to the watching crowd, his voice filled with steel. "You call the weak worthless, but it is your strength that has no worth if it cannot protect them." The words struck like a blade, and silence fell among the aliens. In that moment, the human lifted his blade, not just against the guard, but against despair itself. He had chosen, fully, without hesitation. If he had to fight, he would fight. If he had to bleed, he would bleed. But he would not let the boy's mother die alone in the dark. And as the wind howled through the ruins, the boy clung to his side, whispering, "Please, don't leave us." The man's voice was calm, unshaken. "I won't," he said, "not tonight." The human stood between the rubble and the alien guard. The boy clung to his side, his heart racing. The night was silent except for the sound of shifting stone and the mother's weak breaths. The guard's weapon gleamed. The crowd of aliens watched with cold, distant eyes. But the man's gaze stayed steady, sharp as steel. The guard stepped closer, his boots crushing shards of stone. "You cannot fight us all," he said with a sneer. The man's voice was calm. "Maybe not, but I can fight for them." He raised his blade, battered but unbroken. The boy whispered, "Please, don't let him stop you." The crowd waited for blood. But before the guard could strike, the ground shook with a sudden rumble. The ruined shelter groaned, dust spilling like smoke into the air. Stones shifted, one beam cracked loudly. The boy screamed, "Mom!" as the structure threatened to collapse fully. The man had no choice. He shoved the guard back with all his strength, forcing space between them. Then he dropped his blade and threw himself at the rubble. His hands tore at the stones, pulling them free one by one. The guard cursed and raised his weapon again, but the man's focus did not break. "Why do you care?" the guard shouted. She is not your kind. She is not your blood. The man gritted his teeth, his muscles straining. She is a mother. That is enough, he growled. The boy's eyes widened at those words, a fire of hope sparking in his chest. The rubble was heavy, every stone cutting into the man's skin. Blood ran down his arms as sharp edges tore into him. The toxic air burned his lungs, each breath harder than the last. But he refused to stop. Each stone moved was a promise kept. Each cut was a price willingly paid. The guard lunged forward, but the boy suddenly threw himself in front. No, the child cried, spreading his arms. If you want to hurt him, you hurt me first. The crowd gasped, whispers running like wind through the ruins. The guard froze for a moment, shocked by the boy's defiance. And in that pause, the man ripped away a large beam. Behind it, a pale hand appeared, trembling, reaching for life. Mom, the boy shouted, falling to his knees. The woman's weak eyes blinked open, barely holding on. Her voice cracked. My son, you came back. The boy wept. I never left you, I never will. The man's body shook from exhaustion, his breath ragged. But he kept moving the rubble, clearing more space. The guard shouted in fury, ready to strike again. Yet something had changed. The crowd of aliens was no longer silent. They stared, unsettled, watching a human bleed and suffer for a woman who was not even his own. Some turned away in shame. Others whispered, why would he do this? One old alien murmured, we forgot. Long ago, we forgot what it meant to fight for love. The guard roared, enough, and raised his weapon high. But before he could strike, another stone gave way, collapsing with a crash. The man shielded the boy with his body, taking the hit across his back. Pain surged through him, but he did not fall. Instead, he rose again, lifting the beam with his bare hands and tossing it aside. The boy's mother was clearer now, weak but alive. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, why? Why would a stranger suffer for me? The man's voice was hoarse but strong. Because no mother should die alone, no child should cry unheard. The guard hesitated, anger burning in his eyes. But even he could feel the shift in the crowd. Their silence was no longer agreement, it was doubt. The man's struggle had become more than a rescue. It had become a mirror, showing them what they had lost. The human's body trembled, blood staining the ground. But he refused to fall, refused to stop. Each second was a battle against his own weakness. But with every breath, every push, he proved that compassion was stronger than cruelty. And in that moment, the boy clutched his mother's hand through the gap, whispering, hold on, Mom. He will not give up on you. Neither will I. The human looked at them, mother and son holding each other through rubble and pain. And he felt the strength to keep going. This was not just their fight anymore. It was his fight too. The fight to prove that kindness could survive even in the ruins of a broken world. And as the moonlight poured down on the ruins, the struggle was far from over. But the boy, the mother, and the man were no longer alone. Hope had returned, carried on the blood, sweat, and unyielding will of one human who chose to struggle. The last stone fell away with a heavy crash. Dust rose like smoke, wrapping the night in a gray veil. The boy covered his mouth, coughing, his glowing eyes wide with hope. Through the broken gap, he saw her clearly at last. His mother, pale and trembling, her body thin and weak, but alive. Her hair was tangled, her lips cracked, her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She looked up, eyes shining faintly, and whispered, my son, you came back. The boy fell forward, pressing his hands against the rubble, desperate to reach her. Mom, I never left you. I promised I would not, he cried. His tears mixed with the dust, but his smile broke through the pain. The human knelt beside him, his chest still heaving, his arms bleeding from cuts. He looked at the woman trapped beneath beams and broken stone. Her breath rattled, every sound a battle against death itself. Yet her eyes still glowed with love when they met her son's. The man felt a sharp ache in his chest, a memory of his own mother's eyes in her final days. The woman's hand trembled as it reached out through the rubble. Her fingers brushed her son's cheek, leaving a trail of dust and blood. My boy, she whispered, her voice breaking. You should have run. You should have lived. The boy shook his head fiercely. I cannot live without you. I need you. She tried to smile, though her lips quivered. You must live, even if I cannot. The man could not stay silent. No, he said firmly, his voice steady. You will not die here, not tonight. The woman's tired eyes turned toward him, puzzled. You are not one of us, she breathed weakly. Why risk yourself for me? The man's gaze did not falter. Because you are a mother, and no mother should be left to die when her child still cries for her. The boy's grip on the human's arm tightened. You see, Mom? He came when no one else did. He listened when all others turned away. The mother's tears spilled, her body trembling from weakness. She whispered, I prayed someone would hear him. I did not think it would be you. The man placed his hand against the rubble. Prayers are only answered if someone acts, he said. And tonight, I will act. He began to lift the heavier beams, his muscles burning with pain. The stones dug into his back, every movement tearing at his flesh. But he did not stop, not when he heard the boy's soft voice urging, Careful, she is fragile. Not when he saw the mother's fading strength, fighting to hold on. Every stone moved was a fight against despair itself. The guard who had threatened earlier stood silent now. Even he could not speak as he watched. The crowd around him had changed, no longer mocking, no longer sneering. They were uneasy, whispers passing through them. Why is he doing this? One asked. Why would a human bleed for her? Another answered softly. Because maybe. He remembers what we have forgotten. The human pressed on, his body near breaking. Finally, the mother was freed enough for him to slide her out. He lifted her gently, as if she were glass, his arms cradling her fragile body. The boy ran forward, clutching her hand, sobbing with joy. You're safe now, Mom. I won't let go, never. The mother leaned against the man's chest, her voice faint as wind. You gave your strength, when even my own people turned away. The man shook his head. Strength is wasted if it cannot protect life. The woman's eyes softened, her tears falling freely. For so long, they called me worthless. But tonight, I feel I was worth saving. The boy hugged her tightly, his small frame shaking with relief. You are not worthless. You are everything. You are my world, he whispered fiercely. The human placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice calm but powerful. And that is why I will not let her slip away. The crowd stood in silence, their cold eyes melting into shame. They had called her nothing. They had abandoned her. Yet a stranger, a human, had shown them what true worth meant. The man lifted his head, staring at them, his voice carrying like thunder. You measure life by strength, I measure it by love, and tonight, love wins. The boy's mother, weak but alive, closed her eyes for a moment. And in that fragile silence, hope returned. Not just for one child or one mother, but for a broken people who saw, maybe for the first time in years, that compassion still had power. The human held the alien mother in his arms, her body fragile like glass. The boy clung to her hand, tears streaming down his face. For one moment, hope shone bright in the ruins. But danger had not vanished. Danger was closing in. The ground shook with the distant march of armored patrols. Their shadows flickered against the broken walls as torches lit the night. The boy froze, whispering, They are coming. The mother weakly shook her head. Leave me. Take my son and run. The man's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. No, he said firmly. You both leave, or none of us leave. The mother tried to protest, but her voice was too faint. The boy cried out, I will not go without you. His small hands wrapped tighter around hers, refusing to let go. The human placed the woman gently against a stable wall. He rose to his full height, blood dripping down his arms. His body was battered, but his spirit stood unbroken. The boy looked up at him with fearful eyes. What will you do? The man's voice was low but steady. I will buy you the time to live. From the shadows, the first patrol soldiers appeared, their weapons ready. They saw the mother alive, the boy clinging to her, and the human standing guard. One sneered. So this is the foolish human who bleeds for the worthless. Another raised his rifle. End him, and let the weak die as they should. But the man stepped forward, his blade in hand once more. His bloodied grip tightened, his stance unshaken. You will not touch them, he said coldly. Not while I stand. The boy's heart pounded, terror mixing with awe. He whispered, he is really going to fight them all. The patrol rushed in, weapons flashing. The man moved like a storm, his blade striking fast. Every swing carried the weight of his choice, every strike a promise to protect. He cut through the first soldier, turned, and blocked another's blow. Blood splattered across the ruins, but he did not falter. The boy held his mother tightly, shielding her as best as he could. Tears ran down his cheeks, but his voice was strong. "Mom, look, he is fighting for us. No one else ever did." The mother's eyes blurred with tears. She whispered, Why would he sacrifice himself for strangers?" The boy answered softly, "Because he has a heart they lost long ago." The man staggered as a weapon struck his shoulder. Pain seared through him, yet he pushed forward. His blade tore through another enemy, his body refusing to fall. He shouted through clenched teeth, "Run! Take her! Don't stop until you're safe." But the boy cried, "No, we will not leave you." The crowd of villagers who had once mocked stood frozen. They watched as one human fought against an entire patrol. They saw his blood fall on their soil, his strength burning for a woman they had abandoned. Whispers rippled among them. Why would he do this? Why would he die for her? And in their shame, something stirred, a memory of compassion long forgotten. The man fell to one knee, blood pouring from his wounds. But when the enemy raised a blade to finish him, he surged back to his feet, striking with a roar. His body was broken, but his will was unbreakable. He shouted, "She lives, or I fall here with her." The boy screamed, "No," as another weapon slashed across the man's back. The mother tried to rise, her weak arms trembling. But she could not. Her body betrayed her. Still, her voice rang out, "Stop! Leave him! Can you not see he fights for love?" Her cry stunned even the patrol for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, the man struck again, forcing them back. The air was thick with blood and dust. The man's breath came in ragged gasps, his vision blurred. But when he looked at the boy and the mother clinging together, he found strength again. He thought, "If this is my last night, then let it be for something that matters." And he roared into the night, fighting with every last ounce of his soul. The boy cried into his mother's arms, "Mom, he is giving everything for us. We cannot let him fall." The woman's tears burned her cheeks. "Then we must live. For his sacrifice, we must live." And as the battle raged, the villagers slowly began to move. One by one, they stepped forward, ashamed but awakened. For the first time, they saw worth not in strength, but in love. And though the man bled, though the night was heavy, his sacrifice had already begun to change them. The battlefield fell silent for a breath. Dust hung in the air, glowing under the pale light of the twin moons. The human staggered forward, his blade dripping, his body trembling. Every wound screamed in pain, yet his eyes still burned with defiance. The boy's mother leaned against the wall, too weak to stand. Her son clung to her side, his tears wetting her shoulder. But his gaze never left the human who stood bleeding before them. To the child, that man was no longer a stranger. He was hope given flesh. The patrol soldiers circled, uncertain now. They had expected him to fall long ago. But he stood still, broken yet unbroken. And his voice, though hoarse, thundered through the ruins. "You call her worthless, but she is life to her son, and life is never worthless." The words struck deeper than his blade. The villagers who watched in silence lowered their heads in shame. For years they had measured worth in power. But tonight, a dying human had shown them worth in compassion. The guard stepped forward, fury on his face. "You bleed for her, but you will not leave this place alive." The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then I will die knowing she lived," he answered. The boy cried out, "No, you cannot die. You are our hero." The man turned his head, meeting the child's glowing eyes. His voice softened. "Heroes are not the ones who live forever. They are the ones who give others a chance to live." The boy shook his head wildly. "I will not let you leave us." The mother's trembling hand reached out. "He already gave us more than anyone else ever would." Her tears shone like stars, falling on her son's cheeks. The soldiers raised their weapons again. But something unexpected stirred. From the crowd of villagers, one elder stepped forward. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Enough!" The soldiers froze, stunned by the authority in his tone. The elder's eyes were filled with guilt. "For too long, we forgot what it meant to protect the weak," he said. "We let a mother die while her son begged. But this human bled to remind us of who we once were." Other voices rose from the crowd. He is right, one murmured. We abandoned her. And he, a stranger, showed us our shame, said another. Soon the whispers turned to cries. Protect them, protect the mother and child. The soldiers hesitated, their grip faltering. The man's knees buckled, and he dropped to the ground. The boy rushed to his side, shaking him. No, please, don't leave me. The human's eyes half closed, his voice faint. I told you, I would not leave you tonight. The villagers surged forward, standing between the soldiers and the family. For the first time in years, they stood united, not for strength, not for power, but for compassion. The guard roared in fury, but he was outnumbered. The people he once commanded now turned their backs on him. And slowly, one by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The boy hugged the man tightly, his tears falling onto blood-stained clothes. You are not just human to me, he whispered. You are my family. The mother leaned weakly against the man's shoulder, her voice trembling. You gave your life to prove mine had value. I will never forget. The man's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. No life is worthless when it is loved, he whispered. His hand rested gently on the boy's head. Take care of her. She needs you now more than ever. The villagers, once silent, now bowed their heads. Not out of fear, not out of force, but out of respect. They had mocked, they had doubted. But tonight they saw something greater than strength. They saw humanity. The boy cried into his mother's arms. The mother held her son as tightly as her weak body could. And the man, bleeding but at peace, closed his eyes under the alien moons. His sacrifice had not been for nothing. It had awakened hearts that had long been cold. From that night on, the story spread across villages and worlds. They spoke of the boy who cried for his mother, of the alien villagers who remembered compassion, and most of all, of the lone human who answered when no one else did. In the darkest ruin, he became the brightest flame, and his name was remembered not as a warrior, but as the man who proved that love was the strongest power in the galaxy.